Well, hello and welcome to episode 36. I'm now getting very close to deciding which insurance company I'll go with for my car insurance. I'll base my choice on the funniest and most clever commercial from either Liberty Mutual, Progressive, Geico, State Farm, or Allstate, and I don't care about the price. I'm looking just for the most entertaining commercials since I figure if they can pull that off, they can insure our cars. And how difficult is it to insure a car anyway? They seem to be working more diligently on their TV and online commercials and probably a lot harder than they do on covering their claims. It has to be more difficult to hire a staff of creative directors, managers, writers, and actors and actresses to make these commercials appealing and memorable. And I happen to think that most of these ads are quite clever and sarcastic. And most of these commercials are better than the programs I'm viewing, anyways. Anyone who says that you make your own luck doesn't understand much about life. I'll elaborate on this concept, on this statement, since it does ironically hold some truth to it. I agree that working hard, planning, learning, and focusing on a goal or target does increase your chance for success. But luck plays a major factor in what happens, simply because many of the decisions and situational factors are not in your hands and that you don't know your competition. Luck, or the where, when, and how, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or dealing with circumstances beyond your control, can alter everything no matter how talented, intelligent, and charming you are. Luck does favor the fortunate, and it's just like gambling. You don't know what's going to happen until the dice roll. My son suggested that I watch the video titled Why We Can't Save Those We Love. It's a very moving video, and it really tells the story about the limits of knowing someone and even knowing yourself. Dualism is an interesting subject. The inner you and me is ours alone and basically can only be shared on a certain level. I like to call it the you'll never know me and I'll never know you. The more you realize this, the better off one is. Another way of stating this is, I will disappoint you at some point and vice versa. You will disappoint me at some point. It's inevitable. The more you understand this, the more you understand life itself. Do we really ever know someone? The answer is no, at least from my view. And when did I come to terms with this? I would say probably at the age of 13 or 14. And when you do come to terms with this, you become wise. Then naturally, this gets confirmed almost every day. The term for this is disillusionment, a very common theme in writing. We only get to know a portion of someone and a portion of ourselves, to, of course, a certain degree. Some people are more easily understood. Others are not that easy to understand. To another level, some people like to be the kind of person that is not understood. Some claim that our existence becomes an illusion simply because we understand so little of our lives and other people. Basically, these illusions transform life itself into an illusion. We live within the world of our perceptions and interpretations. And lastly, which would you prefer? Life is an illusion or the opposite, being non-illusory? It's a difficult question, but I prefer the former. I think life is an illusion simply because life as being non-illusory would be boring as shit. And here's a quote from William Blake. Wisdom, like the half-life of regret, only comes later. You find it in the desolate market where few come to buy. And while watching The Maltese Falcon, one of my all-time favorite movies, I noticed that the common greeting for strangers back then was, how do you do? And if you step back and think about the greeting, how do you do, you have to ask yourself, what does it mean? And if someone asked me, how do you do, I would naturally respond with, how do I do what? If you break it down, the question doesn't make sense to me. And when an individual greeted someone back then with this question and or statement, how do you do, the person responded with the same, how do you do? So perhaps it really wasn't a question they're asking, really more of a polite formality. And why would you respond to how do you do greeting with the same greeting? And if it's a question they're asking, it never gets answered, which is how most greetings go anyways. It's a question without an answer, or maybe it's not meant to be questioned. And maybe that's the genius behind it. You don't need to answer it. I suppose that how do you do could have evolved into how do you do it. That would be the more effective question, and I would expect that most people would answer with, I don't know how I do it, I just do it. Over the generations, this greeting has been changed to the eloquent, "How are you?" Or if you're in New York City, "How you doing?" And commonly, most greetings are just a setup, a formality, a way of saying, "I've put my knife or weapon down on the ground." It's been reduced to an empty introduction, hopefully leading to a conversation or similarity. When being introduced to someone by "It's a pleasure meeting you" or "How are you," everyone has their own way of either reading the person's body language or greeting with the reverse of this, just moving past the formality and waiting for the next comment, icebreaker, or conversation starter, or whatever comes next. And if someone asks me, "How are you?" I respond with a common, "I'm doing fine. How are you?" This is just the way it is. And I have never greeted anyone with a how do you do? But then again, I was born way too late for me to say that. Okay, that's enough of this. I've said enough. And I sincerely hope that everyone out there is doing fine. According to the writer Jeff Dyer, destiny is not what lies in store for you. It's what is already stored up inside you, and it's patient as death. If you happen to be in dire need of something, you go to someone who was once in dire need of something themselves. They know what it means. The person who is not familiar with the concept of dire need doesn't know what it means. So you would basically be speaking another language to them. And of course, to follow the logical path of this concept, I suppose that if you're in dire need of something, you probably wouldn't start off asking the person or people if they have ever been in dire need before. But hopefully you know what I mean. In other words, those who are familiar with suffering and need are more likely to have empathy and to understand the needs of those who are down and out. And I will stop here.